dumbing down adults, purveying universal childish tastes in ways that get adults to watch children's movies, buy children's books. I think only of the Harry Potter series, nothing wrong with that, but Shrek, the Shrek series, now 3 or 4 movies, the animated cartoons, those certainly appeal to 15-year-olds, but they are also the best-selling movies in every society at every demographic and age level around the world. More 50-year-olds go to Shrek than go to the movies made for the, quote, adult market. I don't mean the sex market. I mean serious, thoughtful films where people don't shoot each other. And if you look at the top grossing films for the last couple of years, Shrek, Spider-Man, Harry Potter, and The Incredibles, that's 2003 and 2004. Every year, it's gangbuster-style comic book films made for 15-year-old boys, or romances and fantasies made for 14-year-old girls that are the best-selling movies all over the world to every age demographic, thanks to the successful marketing campaigns which, in effect, dumb down adults. When you dumb them down, you have another very powerful and necessary effect. You reduce their efficacy as gatekeepers. Adults, parents, are understood by, and this is the term of the marketing industry, gatekeepers. They stand between those who have something to sell to children and the children. They watch the gates. You want to sell to the children, you've got to get around the gatekeepers. Now, in a world where you're trying to sell more and more to people who may need and want less and less, naturally you go after the kids. You go after the teens, because they have a lot of discretionary income. But then you go after the tweens between 10 and 12, and then you go after the younger ones, and finally you go after the toddlers and the babies, because they are potential consumers. You can get them early and keep them their whole lives. But the problem is, between you and them stand the gatekeepers, the parents, and the mantra of the marketers is remove the gatekeepers. Get rid of the gatekeepers. The marketers are sort of like Peter Pan. You know, how can we get mom and dad out of the way and take the kids off to Neverland, except Neverland turns out to be the mall. And it's not taking them off to an eternal land of play, but an eternal land of shopping, where they pay rather than play. So you do, in a way, rob them of their childhood to become childish and permanent consumers. There is a television network in the United States called Baby First Television, whose target audience is 6 months to 18 months old. Psychologists have found that toddlers, infants of that age, can recognize brand logos before they can speak words. And they see that as an opportunity to imprint their brands on toddlers before even they learn to speak. So infantilization, then, is another piece of this puzzle, as is the move from trademark to brands. A lot of us think, well, brand is just a modern word for trademark. But a trademark, if you look at the history of trademarks were ways in the late 19th and early 20th century of distinguishing generic products. There's salt, there's rope, there's gunpowder. You want to sell yours when there are 3 or 4 types, you put a trademark on it. You say, mine's better, it's drier, better powder, it's cheaper, explodes better, and so on. Same with rope. You use trademarks to, in effect, distinguish yours from others in terms of the real quality and priceworthiness of what you're selling. But sometime in the 1920s and 1930s, it became clear that trademark wasn't enough, that in the end there wasn't that much of a distinction between good, cheap salt, good, cheap gunpowder, good, cheap calico, and every other kind, to merit convincing people to buy yours rather than somebody else's. And it became apparent that if you wanted to identify what you were selling as something that people wanted to have, you had to attach it to affect, sentiments, a lifestyle that had little or nothing to do with the product itself. And so branding was born. And in a brand, you have a way of identifying products not by what they are, or the price they are, or the quality they are, but rather with lifestyle choices and affect that are often unrelated to it. In a book he published called Love Marks, the president of Saatchi & Saatchi, the great British advertising firm, boasted as showing the power of brand loyalty. He said, you know, the only shampoo I have used for the last 25 years is Head and Shoulders. What a great shampoo it is. I love it. And the proof of my brand loyalty is for the last 15 years I've been bald. But I still use Head and Shoulders every day. Now that may seem a contradiction, but of course it's not. The ideal consumer buys something he has no need for whatsoever, but continues to buy it out of brand loyalty. And so increasingly, and this was of course Marcuse's argument and others too, increasingly we begin to see ourselves not as Catholic and Protestant and Canadian and American and male and female, but as what we buy, as the brands we wear, the logos we buy. We are what we eat, we are what we drive, we are where we live. We are defined by the externalities that we can buy. And aside from the fact that that allows us to use our revenue, our income, and our wealth to buy into a class that money itself can't buy, and maybe even to buy into a class we couldn't afford, but we put money aside to buy the brands that make us feel like we belong to that class. That's, by the way, why so many Americans think they're in the middle class, even though by income they're not. But they can watch the same movies, they can wear the same clothes, they can eat the same foods and buy the same wines, and therefore join by brand label the identity of a class which in 19th century economic terms they have no right to belong to, and that politically they ought to not be voting for. But Americans don't just vote their aspirations. That's one way we talk about why so many Americans vote for the folks who have a lot of money, even though most Americans don't. We vote the brands that we wear. We vote the stories and lifestyles associated with the brands that we wear, and increasingly we become identified with those brands. And you see college kids nowadays who will sell their foreheads or their rear ends while they're in college and allow themselves literally to be branded in that old sense of brand, the cattle brand, to wear the logo. You see NBA stars stitching into their haircuts and so forth, the logos not just of loved ones or so on, but also of the commercial corporations that make their shoes or make their jerseys. So that form of branding has also become part and parcel of this new hyper-consumerist society. But even more importantly, and this brings me to the third part of those three terms, dumbing down adults, corrupting children, and swallowing citizens whole. What's happened to citizens in this new world? Because it's, of course, citizens who are the grown-ups. It's citizens who make prudent judgments. It's citizens who think not just about their role as individual consumers, but about their role as mothers and fathers, parents, neighbors, members of a community, citizens of a nation, even neighbors in a worldwide environment. It's citizens who know how to do we thinking, who think in we terms, not just about what I want, but what is good for us. And here comes, along with marketing and brands, comes the new mantra of a hyper-consumerist society. Want to be a citizen? Then vote your dollars. Be a good consumer. Express your private preferences. Through those preferences, through shopping, through what you buy, you can make the kind of world you want to live in.